Hello everyone, this is Mike Yao with Savage Kingdoms coming back with a third video from Fire in the Head Productions. Fire in the Head Productions is the name of the production company, obviously. For those of you who didn't know, it's a fairly new thing. So we'll be publishing the Savage Kingdoms line, certainly the core rulebook, but hopefully if the line continues, there'll be the Savage Bestiary and the Savage East campaign expansion supplement, etc. Possibly some other things down the line. So anyway, this video is to just cover the softcover core rulebook. I have copies of the proof copies as of about 3 weeks ago, or 2.5 to 3 weeks ago. I received them from the printers and they look pretty good. I just want to show them off briefly and just do a quick, fairly quick walkthrough. Maybe this video, hopefully will run about 30 minutes or so. I want to just flip through, but also go into, some minor amount of detail about it. So without further ado, here is the lovely core rulebook with the glossy cover. So as you can see, pretty cool. And I apologize, my headset microphone is not working for some reason. The headphones themselves are, but the microphone is not. I think my cat got a hold of it. So I'm using this terrible native mic on the computer, so I'm having to really project. Fortunately, I'm a stage actor, so hopefully that will help. So if you see my face really close to the computer, you know why. Anyway, book is prettier than my face, so here we go. So there's the Savage Kingdoms logo. We use that as the main art element instead of the typical fantasy illustration sort of thing of a dragon or a warrior or some undead creature. Because Mike Mauer's design there is really awesome, so we thought we'd feature it. Core rulebook for game masters and players. Immersive role playing in the gritty world of dark fantasy for ages 14 and up. Of course, 14 and up, that's just suggested ages. I thought 12 and up was too low, 16 and up was too high, so it is a somewhat gritty, somewhat dark setting, so I think high school age and up is probably good. They would get most of the themes, that wouldn't be too offensive. Not that there's anything really offensive in here, but anyway. There it is. Here's the back. There's your atmospheric blurb at the top, lifted from the prologue. The age of the whoa, that was terrible. At the dawn of the age of Gorgons, the great continent was torn asunder, and in place of its once earthy heart was not but the endless sea. There arose men, anyway, etc. More blurbs. Step into a world of your sword and sorcery, a realm that never was, but always should have been. We have the courage of coming to stand against the darkness. Yeah, so standard kind of cool blurbs to suck people in, hopefully. Get them interested in your product as well as the setting itself. There's our imprint, Fire in the Head Productions. Cool, very cool. Logo designed by Mike Mauer, who designed the Savage Kingdoms logo, which features on the front cover, which I just showed you. That is, I think that's happened to be, just happened, wearing the t-shirt again. So anyway, let me go back to the cool Fire in the Head logo. That's our imprint, as they say in publishing. And the barcode and ISBN number at the bottom. So now we're all official, like copyright information, Facebook, official Facebook site, and official website. I say official, it hasn't been updated in like 2 or 3 months, so I think the Facebook gets more traffic than the actual website. Spine, pretty typical spine. Wait, what am I doing here with the camera? Yeah, full rule book. Fire in the Head. So it's nice and glossy, which I think most people prefer. I certainly do. That's why I've got it done that way. But the interior is matte, also preferred, particularly as a gamer, because when you have the game at your gaming table or whatever setting it is you're gaming at, it keeps light from flaring off the page, reflecting off the page, and being hard to read and kind of blinding you and such. So matte to me is always good for interior. It's white pages, though they look off-white because there's kind of a gray watermark element that looks really cool. It's almost sort of a marble effect. And that also keeps down glare as well as add to the aesthetic value of the pages. So when you first open the book, you've got the lovely map there. of the Western continents, the sort of core default setting starting continent, I suppose. That is, of course, the continent of Astegonia. There's the legend at the top. Western continent called Astegonia by Pridonian scholars. Most commoners don't have any awareness of a greater landmass called a continent or anything called Astegonia, but there it is. Usually, to them, home is just what they know of the world is the nearest river or beyond the furthest mountain range. That's about it. But anyway, that's the Western continent. Hassan and Amanju, I think I've mentioned in previous videos, composed of the east and southern parts of the world. There's also an island continent called Mezca and a bigger island continent called Ragnagard. And legend has it there's even another greater continent on the other side of the world. Of course, most people in the setting don't realize that and maybe it's not, that the world is round. It's probably flat to them, or they just have no real idea of it. And possibly it is. I don't think I've actually ever decided, and if I have, it's certainly not printed in here. Though it does go into some detail about the world and the cosmology and stuff, which I'll briefly kind of skim through in a moment when I get to it in the section. But then we have, after the map, table of contents. So all the credits are there. Myself, Mike Yao, Mike Maurer, Savannah Burgess, Jonathan Cook, Neil Robertson, Neil Dew from Scotland, who did some great work. Mike Maurer, who I've mentioned already. Yeah, those are the contributing artists and design. Well, I'm the designer, but those are the artists. Neil helped me with some of my maps, made them look a lot cooler. By the way, the maps that are in the proof book, they're great, the regional maps, but we're going to get better ones. Because when they were laid out, Neil put this really cool shadow effect to the text of my maps and made it look really cool. But it looks better in as a color printing. So in grayscale, they almost look kind of blurry because of the shadow effect of the text. So we're going to redo those. I mean, they're not bad. They still look pretty cool, but at a glance, they look a little blurry. So we're just going to redo those. So those will be a little different. Then we have the forward and introduction. No need to really show that. I will show this though. This is the chapter break art element at the top. It's really cool. The skull and the bar graphics will be that. So the book starts with theme and atmosphere, the SK experience. Then it goes to the prologue, which contains the timeline and that sort of thing. And the timeline goes all the way back to 13,000 years ago, meaning 13,000 years from the default starting or default setting start. I don't know what I'm trying to say there. Of the typical campaign, which is 9 years after the Gorgon Wars. That is the kind of default start time of the setting. That's what I'm trying to say. But I think there's enough information if you want to set your campaign 7,000 years ago, in the Age of Dragons, or 3,500 years ago, the Age of Fairy. You might have enough going on there to go on. So timeline. Then we go to core game mechanics. And again, just a little part break, little chapter break there. That goes into your 6 attributes and your 8 derived traits. There's also a handy little list of character creation of the order of character creation. Now, a veteran gamer can really create it in whatever order, but for a new gamer, it's probably good to have there's 6 basic steps. Assign your attributes, figure out your derived traits, select your race culture, select your talents, your weaknesses, your skills, and start here. So that's that page. And there's some art at the bottom. That's by John Cook. That's actually a photograph that he and I, he mostly rendered into this cool wood etching line art for drawing. It's actually a photograph. Derived traits. Okay, character races is your next section, next chapter. Right there. It's pretty cool art. I think that's by Neil Robertson. And there's a quick reference chart of the various human nationalities. Sorry, with my computer, you guys, my computer just blanked for no apparent reason. Including non-human optional races at the bottom. Non-human races are optional in the setting. If you want to go completely pulp, sword, and sorcery fiction, then you generally wouldn't have, a la Robert E. Howard, etc. You generally wouldn't have non-human playable races, but here's the option. We have Chennari, Durgar, several types of Shi, which are like elves, tall elves, Sleer, etc. The previous video went more into detail of that characterization video, but there they are listed. And then we go into we break down the races and cultures a little bit more, of course, including all the game statistics. There's a cool drawing of, I think Mike Maurer did that, of an Eridornian knight. It could be a knight of the sword and the rose, or it could just be from another knightly order, or no order at all. So Eridornians, Brithians, Carnians, the Garans, the people of the Emerald Isles, or Islands, Malovians, there's a Malovian chick, girl, a woman at the bottom. She doesn't necessarily have to be Malovian, but she does have a good look for that. And then the Pridonian Islanders, the outer islanders, and the central islanders. Each island is kind of different. Those are the two kind of main divisions. One's a little more civilized than the other, I guess, is the main difference. Scythians, the Thorakians, and then start getting into non-humans. Each racial section is broken down with game statistics, or certain abilities that you gain. Also, where if your attributes are modified. Most human culture, well, actually all human cultures, get +2 total bonus to +1 to 2 attributes that are listed there. Some of the non-humans get a +2 in certain things, but then they have a -1 in something else to kind of counter that. And each racial section has languages, typical life paths, a code of honor is in there, how they typically act, what their duties and loyalties typically like. So you don't have to play it like that, but that's a good guideline. Age of majority, or adulthood, where they typically are considered adults. They have a voice of counsel. Average height and weight, typical hair, eye color, just cool stuff like that. So after the racial section, we go to talents. We have talents, a pretty major part of the character creation process. These are pretty major things. So, and there's a nice handy chart. You may or may not know, talents are broken down into 4 categories: general talents, blood talents or bloodline talents, battle talents, and magic talents or sorcery talents. And they're all listed here, as well as the requirements or prerequisites for each and the point cost. That means creation points or earned points through advancement. Each race and culture has favorable talents that they would pay less for certain ones. Races and cultures, as in the real world, are geared towards certain traditions, certain things, and we're going to include that. The game, to make a somewhat, even though it's fantasy, it still should be somewhat realistic, to use the word, or believable, to stand on its own. Every fantasy setting that merits any kind of emotional response has its own reality. There's some stock art. Then it goes into the talent descriptions. And I won't go into all of those, but there's things like Hunter and Healer's Touch, and Valorous, and Lycanthrope, and maybe Dexterity, and Pending Spats, and my favorite titles to talent: Meat Shield, Pugilistic Follow-Up, Secret Strike, Tripping Attack, Enchant Permanent Object, Battle Mage, Remore, True Name, Words of Power. And anyway, there are lots of talents. That takes us to weaknesses, the next chapter, the next section of the creation chapter. And another chart, handy shortcut reference to this. So weaknesses, of course, like a lot of game systems that have merits and flaws or advantage and disadvantage systems, I just call them weaknesses to be a little different. You get bonus points for taking them, but moreover, you get cool role-playing benefits. That's really the main reason. The extra bonus points are nice for game because you can maybe pick up an extra talent or a few extra skill points, but they're really good for really rounding out that character. As anybody who's familiar with literature knows, be it movie or novelizations, uh, knows that any really good hero, any kind of character that's memorable, has at least a flaw or two. You don't have to take them, but they do give you bonus points. And again, moreover, really good role playing things. Things like obsession, addiction, kinslayer, oathbound, zealot, too tall, too short, tainted, cursed, madness, doomed, etc. And then skills is the next chapter. Next row there. All right, and those are skill charts listing the standard DL. DL means difficulty level. So DL 15 is a simple challenge or difficulty level. DL 30 is challenging. DL 40 is heroic. DL 50, which is epic. And if you score 20 or above what you need in the DL, as probably mentioned in the previous videos, you get a critical success. You get a 0 or less after modifications, you have critically failed. Everyone's favorite. Actually, that can be kind of fun. Then we go to skills, the skill write-up. Each skill section has typical tasks and their DLs. In other words, the number you need to roll to hit to succeed, including specialties. For example, in alchemy, I'm looking at alchemy right now. Specialties are acids, powders, elixirs, oils, poisons, flammables, etc. Typical task of the DLs. Identify basic acid, DL 15. Identify basic potion or oil, DL 20. All the way up to, say, create a rare or very powerful acid with proper equipment, DL 30. Without proper equipment, it's 35 or 40, etc. And you can create quasi-magical potions and stuff with that if you have the craft potion talent. And then the time required to do, and most of this is common, so most of this is just listed to give the game master and players an idea. But most of it's, it's pretty intuitive. You kind of know. I mean, if you're guessing at how long it would take to do something, and then you actually look at where it says time required, you're probably going to be right. Probably 80% of the time, I would think, if you're a relatively experienced GM. So anyway, there are 30 skills. They run from acrobatics all the way to weaponry range. But yeah, and magical arts are seven different disciplines. So there's really 7 sub skills in magical arts, and it goes into about performing magic, ritual magic, sacred spaces and sanctums, void regions, and places of non-power, sacrifices and blood magic, and that sort of thing. And I may have touched upon it on a previous video, but just in case I didn't, magic or the magical arts or sorcery in the Savage Kingdom setting, the default way of performing magic is actually ritual magic. That's actually the common way. So combat magic is actually not really the normal way. That's you're kind of really casting on a fly, on a whim. Battle magic. Hence why a short ritual gets +5 to your magical arts skill roll, and a long ritual gives you +10. That's either 30 minutes up to or 3 hours. So combat magic is a little harder to do unless you're really, you have really lots of skill levels in that one magical arts, and the spell you're doing is only DL 10 or 15. And even then, you can still roll a natural 1, and with the reroll get a 0 or less and still critically fail. So use it as your own caution. Yes, that. So getting to the skills. After the skill section, then we have life paths. Now, as you may probably already know, Savage Kingdoms is not a class-based system, but we did include things called life paths, which is just a fancy word for like a character concept or a focus or an occupation, a profession, a vocation. And so here we go, chapter for that. And that's things like assassin or barbarian or hunter or ranger or knight, thief, gladiator, that sort of thing. Oh, your character age and lifespan is just before that. And then we have a sample of Durgar and She writing. Durgar runes, She letters. So, I'll show that off. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, life paths, shaman, sorcerer, priest, that sort of thing. And that's just to give you like, okay, say a new player or even a veteran player wants to play barbarian, but there's a lot of talents to kind of go through and skills and weaknesses. So this gives you each one of the life paths gives you suggested talents, suggested weaknesses, suggested skills, suggested races / cultures, suggested starting gear, etc. And then there's a brief section, about 3 pages, maybe 4 pages, of sample characters. And that is if a new player just needs to grab a character really quick with 5 or 10 minutes of prep, you're ready to go. For example, there's a Malovian Necromancer, a Laurentian Noble, a Kimrethi Scout, an Eridornian Knight, Brithian Archer, Norish Raider, Thorakian Warrior, Pydonian Priest, from the Central Isles, and yeah, this stuff. And the GM can also use those as NPCs, as quick NPCs. Next chapter is actions and combat. And here we go. I didn't want to just call it combat because I think a lot of GMs and players forget that there's a lot more to action than just mere armed conflict or even unarmed conflict. Chase scenes through the streets are awesome. Scaling a mountain cliff while it's windy and all this amazing. I could probably list a million things if I had enough time in this video, but that sometimes get overlooked, or even within combat itself, different types of combats, honor duels, single combats, instead of just always a skirmish, or a brawl in the tavern. That's not necessarily lethal, but people are just angry and drunk, and it's also sort of a form of entertainment, actually. Uh, so anyway, so that's why it's called actions in combat, because it's kind of all of it. And then there's a subsection after that's really kind of focusing on combat. There's the different types of actions. In Savage Kingdoms, there's primary actions and simple actions. Primary action is the main thing, as it says, a primary, such as an attack or casting a spell or using the persuasion skill to intimidate. So major things that have major effects. That generally will almost always warrant they would always warrant a skill roll to be primary action. Simple actions are, and you can have up to 3 in a round as suggested. Really good narrative example. I draw my sword, I shout a war cry, and I advance on my opponent. You just did 3 simple actions. You drew a sword, one simple action. You said something, shouted a war cry. That's simple action number 2. You moved up to your mobility rating in yards. That's also a simple action. If you move through difficult terrain, over half your mobility, then say through really uneven ground, or there's spikes on the ground, or the snow is really deep, or sand is really thick, that would be considered challenging terrain. So that would actually be a simple action to move your full mobility for that, or anything that you might have to make an acrobatics roll to keep your balance or falling. And then it goes into various conditions of not only combat, but also really anything, just like destroyed, diseased, defenseless, damaged, concealed, blinded, cowering, encumbered, burdened, cover. How many types of cover? 3, light, medium, and heavy. Makes sense. And all the stats that kind of go with that. Falling, inebriated, which I somehow misspelled in the proof copy, but we've caught it. And falling damage. Flanked or outnumbered. Free attack, finishing blows like coup de grace. Grappled, guarded zone, mounted, loyalty rating, muted, off guard, stunned, terrified, painted, etc. Prone, sickened, poisoned. And then the combat system, there's a little narrative example of combat using 2 playtest characters that actually made it to mid to high advancement, Auric and Australia. So they're kind of featured in there, fighting a troll. And then more melee or more combat specific talks a little bit about melee attacks, range attacks, how you would do action resolution for all that stuff, attacking an off guard target, Target is prone. Target is either off balance. Grappling, punching, or kicking. Movements, and then specialized movement like stealth, climbing, or swimming. Mounted combat, casting a spell, throwing vials or flasks, alchemical stuff or whatever. Using other skills as well in combat because other things can come up like swimming or sailing or percent climbing. You can almost use any skill in combat, particularly really creative, cool combat too. Fatigue and stamina loss, healing and recovering, character death, everyone's favorite. Recovering stamina, and then there's a little section about exploration, about weather and terrain and geography, special features, settlements, flora and fauna, travel distance. Travel distance all based on the mobility trait for the most part, modified by terrain, of course, or if you're kicking into a gallop most of the day. So all that's kind of included in there, and any stamina loss that you would endure for such specialized or faster form of travel. Scenes and encounter included a little encounter table that includes 6 general types of encounters, not only with creatures, but things like hazards, quicksand, avalanche, pit traps, different types of creatures, supernatural beasts, gigantic animals, regular animals, predatory animals, puzzles and dilemmas such as ancient writing, a prophecy, a vision, interaction encounters with farmers, nobles, fugitives, etc. These are just some examples given. They may have some information for what's on the road ahead, or maybe they just paint a picture of the verisimilitude of the setting, just adding more, quote, realism or believability to the setting. Puzzles, dilemmas, hazards, chasm, deep river, falling trees, avalanches, etc. And then there's a good chance of no encounter. And the encounter chart's modified by weather, whether it's nighttime or dusk, season, whether it's in a civilized area or out in the wilderness or on a road or whatever. Added without hopefully being too many modifiers, but feel free not to use it if you don't want. Orders and sets is the next chapter, and again, not a class-based system, but if you want to have more focus for your character, a good way to do that is to join an elite affiliation, an order or a stacked organization. And those are such things as the Circle of the Raven, the Company of the Black Lion, Emerald Harpers, Blood Disciples, and it's just a 2-point talent, elite affiliation, or priest in order to get into one of these. Crimson Skull Pirates, Green Knights of Cormac, Golden Crucible, Iron Legion, Knights of the Golden Rose, etc. And the various priesthoods of Druidic Order. Priests of some of the northern gods like Fragner and Signa, and the western god, that's actually the Druidic religion. The southern gods such as Argathon, Typherius, Romega, Lucia, Atores, Nepalos, Orpheus, and etc. And then we get to a brief gazetteer, and we've included another map of the main continents here. The mainland at the top and the Pridonian Isles at the bottom, collectively all known as Astegonia. And it starts with just a few things of celestial nature. It talks about the 2 moons in the setting, that there's a red sun and a red giant sun, something about the stars beyond, some of the more notable stars in the sky, and what people call them, such as the Light of Galen, or the Eye of the Worm, the Eye of the Dragon, the Blood Star, the 3 Lanterns, the Heart of Zur, the Void Sea, etc. And then it goes into kingdoms and realms, starting with Altivaros, which is a small island which has the pirate haven of Dreadport on it. And then each section includes the maps I kind of touched on a little previously. As you can see, they look really good. You probably can't tell in the video, which is a good thing, the blurry effect of the text. But again, it's really not that bad, but I thought we could go ahead and fix it because it's kind of an easy fix before the official book comes out. So that's and all of those little regional maps pop up throughout the gazetteer section. Right there. That's Kimra. It's pronounced Kimra, not Kimred. Buccaneer Bay, Osmandos, Lithalor, Empire of Laurentia, Yurga. So yeah, it goes all the way through. Let's see, here's Melovia, the Bay of Ravens, Redthorn Forest, area, Island Neopos. So, in each gazetteer section, in each kingdom section, it actually lists cool things, or at least I think they're kind of cool, so I included them. Things like climate and weather, coins and currency, primary imports, primary exports, common sayings, common customs. So it's all included there if you want to know what the average Brithian likes to eat, or what their funerary customs are, what their a lot of the sayings or slogans that they might have, and nomenclature of their culture. It's all here. So notable characters, any of the like main NPCs from that region, the heraldry and symbology involved, some of the flags and banners, the primary religions, the geography of the land, so yeah, stuff like that. After the geography section, then we have the I think it's the cosmology section, cosmology and the seven magics. And that just goes into how it all fits together, what the seven disciplines of magic uh, fit in a metaphysical or quasi-religious, quasi-spiritual belief, how it all links up, basically. Cosmology. Discussing the Earth world, which is the mortal planes, the world as we know it. The other world, also known as the mirror world. The shadow world, also known as the Fey realm or the Fey world. The nether world, also known as hell world or the underworld. The overworld, which is also known as the light world or the celestial plane. Now, not everyone agrees to this cosmology or believes that it even exists. So there are other things that other cultures, other that might have, like their belief in Oradon or Rodon, and the Grey Realm, Innis Nor, Isles of the Dead, Innis Avalar, Vinta Pythiris, the Luna Quale, which is the primary belief system of the Shi, and the Luna Dol, which the dark Shi kind of adhere to. And then starting with the deities of the north, the more human deities from Andorok down to Broaden, deities of the west from Bronfinnan and Brannon through Luella Ravendart, deities of the south from, which there are a good bit of those, from Argathon all the way down through Pytherius, it even mentions Gorgathon, the fallen god, the creator of the Gorgons, the stillborn god. The next chapter, spells and magic, and I promise I'll be wrapping up pretty soon. We're 2/3 of the way through the book. And that lists, hold on. And that has a handy little spell chart. There are I think there are about 65 spells maybe. 60 to 65 spells. Maybe I should count them one day. In the core rulebook. So, which is, I think, a good number. It may not sound like a lot right off, but know that each Savage Kingdom spell, almost all of them, there's some of them aren't, but most of them are almost like 2 or 3 spells at one. For example, Conjure Flame, with that one spell alone, you can, there's 3 different steps to it, 3 different variations. One is you can just conjure a small flame to light a torch or a candle. Another is to, if you have at least 3 skill levels in that weapon, in that melee weapon, you can make your weapon flame up, or you could throw a small ball, orb of flame. So basically my point is a lot of the spells are almost 2 or 3 different spells in one. So there's probably more to it than you think. Then starting with the spell descriptions. Aura of Majesty all the way through Water Shaping. And each spell description has the stats or things like Discipline. Many of the spells are, 2 or 3 that, like, I'm looking at Glamour, that's just Shadow Discipline, but a lot of the others are several. Flight is air only, but Fire Script is fire and shadow. Fiery Blast is air and fire. So it's not really just literally fire blasting around. It's actually superheated air. Enhanced Armor is actually earth, fire, and light. And then there's requirements, what you need to even know the spell. I'm looking at Fire Script right now. You need Magical Arts Fire Shadow level 2 and Language level 1. So sometimes you need mundane skills as well. It also lists what ritual materials you would need, such as white candles or and then if you get some really special rare things, it may get you a +2 bonus to the magical arts roll, or it may give you an extended duration of the spell. Things like a lock of an angelic being's hair, or certain holy symbols from certain faiths. Here's another one: blood from a magician's skull or femur bone. A vampire's tooth or handful of dirt from a grave wight's tomb grants +2 to the roll of the magical arts roll. So stuff like that, as well as your typical stuff: casting time, stamina cost, very important. The DL needed for the spells to succeed. Spells do not automatically succeed. They are a skill like anything else. Duration and effect area and range. So after the spells, then we have, and we're getting very close to the end of the book and about to wrap up on the video. I was shooting for 35 minutes and we're almost at 36, so that's not too horrible. Starting gear. Here's a drawing of the weapons, of some weapons, by the way. And then the gear starts in each subcategory of the gear and equipment is pretty much what you would expect: armor, weapons, shields, helmets, clothing items, transport, goods and services, slaves, mounts, beasts, that sort of thing. And then it lists a half a page about character encumbrance and also object materials, or object quality, item quality. Most items are assumed to be average quality, but it does go into detail about if something's damaged or poor quality. Exceptional quality items, master crafted items, heroic items, which is when things start getting to be magical, almost magical items. You might find a mastercraft talisman that's mastercrafted that might hold a spell for a day or two, but in order for an object to be permanently enchanted, it generally has to be heroic or legendary. Legendary is as it says, those are big major artifacts, relics. Typically from an earlier age when magic is more fluent and fluid in the world, not quite as broken as it is now, which is why the skill wall, represented by the skill roll, actually, that you have to do, why magic is not necessarily always automatic. Then there's some examples of legendary and heroic enchanted items, such as the blood crown, that are specific to the setting. The jewels of Silvarian, the Star Song's blade, the tome of Malagon the Mad, the horn of Rodan, the spear of Argathon, the warhelm of Gorgathon, etc. Item and weapon construction, a little bit about that. Bronze, copper weapons, some stuff about cold iron and silver, because certain supernatural creatures are affected more so by those. Stone and wood, and then there's the bestiary. So it's right there, savage bestiary. And it goes through animals, through gigantic animals, all the way through supernatural creatures. So basically through bears and wolves and different types of horses, and panthers and ravens, through giant scorpion, giant spider, saber-toothed tiger, mammoths, because they still exist in the setting actually, great wolves or dire wolves. And then a little bit about the different sort of subtypes of supernatural creatures, such as undead, gorgons, fae or fairy, elementals, dragons, draconic beasts, demons, and angels. Demons and angels are actually really the same thing. They're just kind of subcategories. It's kind of the mythology is sort of reversed in Savage Kingdoms. Demons were first, and angels actually kind of rebelled against the wickedness of them. So they are still, supernatural, scary creatures, angels, but they're just not quite as nasty as the demons. So, and all the stats thereof, of course. There's a stat block of something. I'm sure I'm just kind of pressing it on the camera. What is that? Gray and white. Anyway, special abilities. So yeah, all the statistics for all these creatures that you need. A lot more creatures will be coming out in the Savage Bestiary, probably 80 to 100 more, plus a lot of NPCs. Hopefully that should be done in the next couple of weeks, actually. Then we go to the Savage Kingdoms the Game Master section, GMing Savage Kingdoms. And that's just some advice about to how not only to approach GMing in general, so you could use this advice for other games as well, other RPGs, but also specific Savage Kingdom stuff. Savage Kingdoms was designed more a theater of the mind style, but it is you can use miniatures and battle maps and talk about that pretty easily. Adventure ideas, magic and mystery, character death, and starting over. A little bit about rewards, treasure, and experience points. And then there's an optional rules section, which closes out the end of the book. And that has some pretty cool stuff like alternate wealth system, which I actually might end up using for my own personal games. It's an easy way to, instead of itemizing everything. And then we've got things like alternating skill increases. So having characters can only increase the skill level every other advancement instead of every one. It's just optional. But the core is like you can do it every level. But these are just some optional ideas. Not using critical failures if you want, limiting 3 attacks, having a common tongue. The default setting doesn't have a common tongue, which is because I don't really like those. I think they're really silly. But if you don't want to deal with all the language stuff, you can just say that the Larinthian or Pridonian language or Brithian might have spread pretty much to the whole Western continent, and just count that as a common language. Downtime actions, because there is that option in the game too. Limited blood talents. And wait, I skipped something that's really important. Before the game mastering section, there is the here we go. The section about there's the advancement chart, how many XP you need, and what benefits you gain. Some more pretty cool artwork. I think that's by John Cook. It's actually a photograph that we kind of rendered, or he rendered in to make it look more like a line drawing or old wood lithograph or something. It's really cool. And also the game assumes that every 30 XP that the player suggested players have 3 to 6 months of downtime, just to keep the progression a little more believable. But you don't have to do that. But if you do that, you have the benefits of downtime actions. There are 3 tables you could roll in. If a player character decides to do that, he or she does have to stick by whatever comes up, because it could be something negative. There's a social events table, a military events table, and a knowledge pursuits table. You don't have to roll on any of them. But you did, for example, 1d20 on knowledge pursuits. If you roll a 1, you unearth a dark, forbidden, and likely better left unknown secret. You must take the talented weakness. But you also gain a +1 other bonus to your lore skill. So that's actually a good and bad thing. Mostly bad. You get the tainted weakness, which basically is the only way you really can be fully evil in the world. And certain creatures can detect that. However, you gain +1 to your lore skill. So, and there are other things like that. Some are good, some are bad. Some events don't happen at all. There's about 30% chance that nothing major happens in those months, a couple of months of downtime. Then the game mastering thing I was talking about, with all kinds of optional things. And then we end the rule book with the requisite character sheet that you can photocopy. There's the official character sheet, page 1 and page 2. It's actually really all that's needed. If, like any role-playing game, if you want to attach another page or 2 of other stuff, of more inventory or character background stuff, or character portrait, then you definitely go. But all the main core stuff is just on those 2 pages. So that is the softcover core rulebook. That's the proof copy. That's the proof copy. There it is in the back. Proof. 300 pages once the index, because just a quick note on that before I end. We showed this. I brought the softcover core book to DragonCon about 2 weeks now, 2.5 weeks ago. And it was a really big hit. The players really liked it. They thought it was a lot of information, especially for the price. It's only $24.95, by the way. So, and you could pre-order that through my PayPal account. Just email me or Facebook me or put in the comments down below. And you can pre-order. Several people already have. Hopefully it should be published in about 3 weeks. Because again, that's just a proof copy. But the one drawback from people at DragonCon, not really a drawback, what criticism was we needed an index. So I went home and did so. Spent 13 to 14 hours. It's a lot of cross-referencing, as you probably know if you've done an index. But it's totally worth it because now, you know, pretty much every spell, talent, skill, kingdom name, race, culture, language, whatever, is all can be found in the index. The table of content is great to one extent, but it's not nearly as detailed as the index. You can just kind of flip through and look up whatever condition effect or whatever it is you want to look for. So that's it, guys. Thanks for hanging out this long, 45 minutes, a little longer than I wanted, but not too horrible. Hopefully it was informative and detailed. Thanks again to all my Kickstarter backers and all my non-Kickstarter backers as well, because there are some of those that found out about the campaign too late or just couldn't afford it, but they're still into it. And I appreciate you guys and the play testers, especially. To my awesome girlfriend Karen for putting up with all this. I'm trying to get her into the hobby, and she likes Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, so she does like fantasy, but she hasn't quite made the leap to tabletop fantasy gaming. But we'll see. Maybe she's like some semi interested, I think. But she loves Dragon Con. She was 2 years in a row with me there now. Although I've been going since the beginning of it. So anyway, I want to wrap this up. Thank you guys. Pre-order the book. Also, oh yes, Drive Through RPG has the PDF. It's only $5.99. It's had fair interest so far. It's done pretty well on there. So just $5.99. It's the full thing you just saw. It's not a stripped down PDF version. I mean, it is a PDF, but it's not stripped down. The art's there. Everything that I just showed you is there. And hopefully you'll consider picking up the hard copy book when it's out. Thank you guys for listening. Again, I'm Mike with Savage Kingdoms and Fire in the Head Productions. And I will talk to you again soon. In the meantime, happy adventuring.